FPL game week 35 transfer targets. There's still one game left to go in game week 34, but we're looking ahead to game week 35 for the best players to buy. So in today's video, we'll be looking at the Vert verified power ranking, my top 5 for the next 5. Well, there's only 4 game weeks left now. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you smash that like button and hit that subscribe. Let's get into it. What's up? It's FPL Vert, where arrows go green, and as you can see, they are currently green. Like 1 million other managers in game week 34, I have the free hit chip active. It's actually the 5th highest usage of the chip ever recorded, so hope your game week's going well. Of course, the game week hasn't finished yet. We do have one more game to look forward to, with Nottingham Forest hosting Brentford on Thursday. And I've got Sir Chris Wood just left to play in that game, so he'll be begging a brace to make that green arrow greener, I'm sure. Forest's game with Brentford was rescheduled from the weekend due to the FA Cup semi-finals taking place. And this is obviously also why we had the double game week in game week 33 with Manchester City versus Aston Villa and Arsenal versus Crystal Palace, originally supposed to take place in game week 34 but couldn't due to the semi-finals. So that's why it got brought forward. However, Forest's game got pushed back but remained in game week 34. So with the FA Cup, Crystal Palace saw off Aston Villa 3-0 to book their spot in the final, and Manchester City defeated Nottingham Forest 2-0 to make the FA Cup final for the 3rd successive year. The FA Cup final will be taking place on Saturday 17th May, which clashes with Game Week 37 fixtures. The 2 FA Cup finalists, Crystal Palace and Manchester City, were scheduled to face Wolves and Bournemouth respectively, but as a result of the final, both these league fixtures will have to be moved. The landing spots for these rescheduled fixtures are slated to either be in the midweek of Game Week 36, which would cause a double game week for the 4 involved teams, so Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Manchester City and Wolves, or the midweek after in Game Week 37, much like Forest and Brentford this week. So move the original dates but remain in the same game week, like Forest. Fixture guru Ben Quellin reckons that moving the games to midweek after in Game Week 37 is more likely. Of course, if what goes up must come down, so if it is moved from Game Week 37, we'll get a double in Game Week 36, but then you'll get a blank in double Game Week 37. So definitely hold up on transfers for sure, because we need to know how to manage that. Tottenham Hotspur have also proactively requested that their fixture, also in Game Week 37 away to Aston Villa, to be moved to the midweek of 36 due to their participation in the Europa League. Spurs are set to face Norwegian side Bodo Glimt in the semi-final, and if they were to progress to the final, it would be set for Wednesday 21st of May. So essentially, Spurs are asking for more time to prepare for this final should they get there, as the Europa League could shape their season. In addition to the potential trophy on the line and snap their drought, they would also gain automatic Champions League qualification and all the status and riches that come with participating in Europe's elite competition. However, this request has actually been met with some pushback, as Spurs' opponents Aston Villa are also in the quest for Champions League qualification. While Spurs are looking to achieve this goal, Champions League qualification, by winning the Europa League, the Villains are aiming to secure this via finishing in the Premier League's top 5 positions. Not only is Aston Villa's match against Spurs their final home match of the season, the club anticipates that rescheduling would mean a shorter turnaround between their matches on their side, and that could disrupt their own preparations for their own crunch games in their pursuit for European qualification. As a result, Villa believe rescheduling this would favour Spurs and Hamper Villa. So, too long didn't read, or if you're skipping to the end of this part, there's 6 teams that could double in Game Week 36. There's also 0 teams that could double in Game Week 36. We won't know until official communications, so this is a plea to please hold your transfers until we do know. So into the Vert verified power ranking, my top 5 for the next 5 across all the positions. Of course, this would be the top 5 for the next 4 game weeks. We start with Jordan Pickford at number 1 if you were to buy a goalkeeper this week, because he hosts now relegated Ipswich and Southampton, both at home, in what will be the final 2 games at Goodison Park. So if you want to lean into narratives, maybe there's a spirited performance there for Everton in the home games. Of course, Ipswich and Southampton have been relegated for a reason. They don't get enough points, so obviously easy fixtures on paper, but it doesn't necessarily translate to actual clean sheets most of the time. And then for the rest of the list, it's pretty much just filling the blanks because, of course, Sales, we don't know what their result's going to be. But I think obviously they're facing Leicester as well. And, they're okay, but they're in the hunt for top 5. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be defensively solid. Of course, they did concede 2 goals on the weekend, but it was kind of a rotated team as well. Raya, obviously the best in terms of underlying metrics, but Liverpool and Newcastle, you expect both teams that can score. So pretty much if you're buying a new goalkeeper, it would just be Pickford. But if you're on wildcard, I would get Raya just so that you can have a fixture to play your goalkeeper in gameweek 38, because playing your goalkeeper away to Newcastle on the last day of the season doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Into the defenders, and gvardiol tops the defender rankings for me at the moment. Of course, he had a blank in game week 34, but he did get 7 points in the double, which is not amazing, but not awful either. So, that's fine. Of course, no attacking returns in 12 game weeks in the Premier League for gvardiol, but he manages to score and keep a clean sheet on the weekend, which would have been a monster haul, but it's fine. Let's just tell ourselves that he's warming up for the end of the season. And then Mikalenko and O'Brien make the list as well, just because of course Pickford made the list for the fixtures that he has, and that these two are cheap pickups in case you want to finance bigger moves elsewhere. Trippier makes here because of what he did in the blank game week just now with his 2 assists, and of course Aït-Nouri did well as well, but he's going away to Manchester City, so Trippier can make it here just because of the form. And Newcastle are also in win now territory, as are Manchester City. And Saliba's here just because he plays for the best defence, and they kind of do need to get some results to see out the season and hopefully keep some momentum as they make the Champions League final for Arsenal. Into the midfielders, where it's always a lot more exciting than defenders and goalkeepers, that's for sure. And we do have Bryan Mbeumo as number 1 in the midfielder rankings. In fact, I'd actually say he's probably the number 1 asset for across all the positions this week, with Saka providing no doubt a headache in terms of minutes in the Premier League as Arsenal navigate a Champions League semi-final. And of course Brentford haven't played in game week 34 yet, but for game week 35 they'll be hosting Manchester United, which is now being downgraded to a green fixture, as is Tottenham at home as well, which is quite amazing to see really, when you think about where these clubs are supposed to be. They're in the Big Six, and now they're green fixtures according to FDR. But anyway, I think both Bryan Mbeumo and Kevin De Bruyne are the best captain picks this week. Not too sure where I'd go at the moment, but of course Kevin De Bruyne was rested in Manchester City's FA Cup semi-final on the weekend. So to me, that tells me that he is very important for their league campaign, because of course they are in the pole position for the Premier League to finish in the top 5, but they need to win all their games to make sure of it. And Wolves, of course, has now been upgraded to a grey fixture from previously a green fixture. And I don't think Pep will be taking any chances. So De Bruyne should be good to start. Probably is my favourite captain at the moment. But I think when he's started the previous 4 Premier League games and the impact he has on the team, he's the captain. Of course, we saw that hero's performance to see the win over Crystal Palace as well when they're 2-0 down. I think both players are very important, and you can see by the underlying metrics. Of course, Bryan Mbeumo is a lot more consistent, and he's done a lot more this season. So Bryan Mbeumo is probably the safer captain, but Kevin De Bruyne probably the differential captain. Then of course Jarrod Bowen as well. He just quietly ticks along. I mean, you can see by the points per match, 5.1 points per match, and his underlying metrics match it as well. He had 2 assists on the weekend, but of course West Ham weren't able to see it out. But since he returned from injury, Jarrod Bowen, in game week 24, he's had 4 goals and 4 assists. But only Jacob Murphy and Mo Salah can better those returns across the midfielders. And the Hammers face both Europa League semi-finalists in Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United. So these 2 teams should be prioritising their cup involvement, which may result in rotation and less performance. So of course they're not performing well in the league anyway, but I don't think there's much importance to them at the moment. Then Morgan Rogers just comes in as a just think of him as expensive 4.5. Like if there's an issue, you can just sub him on, sub him off. Aston Villa's fixtures aren't the best, but they're not amazing. They're not the worst either. So, and he doesn't take a long. Obviously, sometimes he has a haul, sometimes he just has a little assist, but you never know. And then I would actually go with Merino as the 5th best midfielder, just because people that have Rashford, of course, Rashford has now been it hasn't been confirmed, but the reports are that he's going to miss the rest of the season. So, if you need to downgrade, obviously I would say improvement in Buono, but if you need to downgrade Rashford, if you haven't got anything in the bank, I'd probably go for Marino, just because Trossard probably won't be starting in the league after this, because between today, Tuesday, and next Wednesday, the Champions League semi-finals will be over, and then the Champions League final, should Arsenal get there, won't be until after the season finishes. So you'd expect Marino to start the games, to be honest. And into the forwards, we do have Yoane Wissa at number 1. I've never actually owned him this season, but he's quietly been returning. In fact, since the turn of the year of 2025, he has 7 goals and 3 assists. Only Mateta and Isak have accumulated more points across forwards, and only Cunha has more key passes. And in fact, Isak is the only forward that can match his 16 big chances since 2025 began. So, a lot of things to like about him. He returns, he has great underlying metrics, and he has the fixtures to match as well. So I think Yoane Wissa will be my favourite forward to target right now. Of course, I mentioned that Rashford's been reported that he's going to miss the rest of the season, which should mean that Ollie Watkins should be good to start all the remaining fixtures for Aston Villa. So he makes the list as well. Obviously, he's a lot more expensive than Wissa, so that's why he's second. We haven't seen Wood's brace yet, but I'm expecting that he should tick along quite nicely as well, given that Nottingham Forest do have quite a lot to play for in terms of finishing in the top 5 and now out of the FA Cup, so the Premier League is all they have left to see out their season. Matheus Cunha makes the list because he returned 15 points, but it's a mixed bag of fixtures really. And then Marmoush is here as well, but it is reported that Erling Haaland is back in training as well. So I'd probably be cautious of these two. So you'll see in my wildcard draft my favourite 3 forwards, but you can probably tell from here. So this is how I would probably be looking at for a game week 35 wildcard draft. Of course, it is dependent on doubles and blanks, but I'm making this just in case there are blanks, so that's why we have certain players on the bench that could fill in. But we would be doubling up with Raya and Saliba, and then Mikalenko and Pickford for Arsenal and Everton, given their fixtures. Gvardiol and De Bruyne will make the team as part of Manchester City. Marmoush would be here if we had some clarification on Erling Haaland's return. But as mentioned, Brandon Bumo and Bowen and De Bruyne, top 3 midfielders for me. Just keep Salah just because there's nowhere else to spend the funds really. And I would probably drop Isak. He's been a bit quiet recently, and I think Wood and Watkins both have something to play for. Obviously Newcastle do as well, but Isak's not really in the best of form, and I think if you're on a wildcard, you might as well just chase the differential. So I'd go for Wissa personally. So this is what I'd look at with Rodgers on the bench, Aït-Nouri, and Justin's here just in case there is a blank in game 37. He'll be hosting Ipswich, so that's why he's there. So yeah, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments and DM me on Instagram or Twitter, and I will be back later this week to discuss my team selection and what I'm doing with my team. So thanks for watching, and speak soon.